It just might be the single biggest historical story in Canada. But it's become increasingly obvious to me that for a very, very long time, I knew almost nothing about it. It's the summer of 2021, and in recent weeks, there has been a reckoning in Canada, especially among non-Indigenous Canadians, but also the world, as there's more and more understanding about residential schools and how they were operated in Canada, the atrocities of that, the horrors. As that moves into the mainstream, more and more of us are wondering, what was the true history of Canada? As a Canadian, I can strongly say that the time for reconciling Canada is long, long overdue. It's just no longer good enough to just be sort of admiring the issues. And it's time to take some action. And one of the first steps to taking action to reconciling Canada is to learn and acknowledge the true history of this big, amazing country we call Canada. To even figure out how it got its name. Do you really know? I'm Barry Wilson. I'm a third-generation Canadian, son to Carol and John. My ancestors, they came from Scotland to Turtle Island to find a better life. And this video is being streamed from Secwepemculecw, which is the unceded and traditional territory of the Secwepemc Nation in southern British Columbia, Canada, where I have the privilege of living and working. Not long ago, I didn't even know what unceded meant. So much to learn. If I'm honest, like many non-Indigenous Canadians, learning the history of my country, Canada, was dominated by a colonial narrative. It's a story of great conquest and bravery and the taming of this wild land by settlers. Now, I've always been interested in history, and I don't mean like the boring stuff like memorizing, timelines and dates and crazy names and just sort of that churn of the turning of events. I don't mean that. What I mean is I've always been interested in the stories of how it was, how things really were. What was it like? What was it like for my ancestors, coming here and in pursuit of their dreams for a better future? What were the connections between people, the people that were here and the people that were coming? How did they live on the land? I've heard so many stories about enduring extreme weather. How did they do that? And what did they learn? And I love looking at old pictures of places and maps and really sort of imagining in my mind, what was it really like? How was it originally? In my final year of getting my degree at the University of Alberta, I was lucky. I only had 2 courses that I had to take, and the rest were electives. And the Dean of Forestry, Dr. Peter Murphy, who was offering an individual studies course, he was looking for a researcher to go and help him construct a timeline of the events or the development of the forest industry in Alberta. One of those timelines. But it sounded really interesting, and I was really into knowing more about history. So I applied, and I got the opportunity to work with Dr. Murphy on it. So to be honest, it was tedious, but also really interesting. The tedious part was like pulling out and recording all of these dates and trying to build this timeline. Really tedious and a little boring at times, but the interesting part was reading the accounts and the stories of the place. So that semester, for a couple days a week, you'd find me either deep in the archives of the Royal Alberta Museum or somewhere in the stacks on campus at the library, reading settlers' accounts in their journals, like the reports from the Hudson's Bay Company trading posts and forts, or the writings of British explorers like David Thompson, or even the memoirs of the missionaries like Father Lacombe, who founded St. Albert, one of the first colonial settlements in Alberta. And so I'd be combing through all of this material, looking for anything to do with trees, forests, lumber mills, lumber stores, anything that was made with forest products, and writing it all down and tracking it in time. And so for months, I tweezed out the details from the journals of Rupert's Land. And by the end of my research term, I'd made it all the way to the beginning of the 20th century. It takes a lot to pull that information out. And through the process, I learned a lot about the British point of view of life in the Wild West of Canada. And it really underscored the importance that settlers had on the railroad, agriculture, religion, and all of the roles those played in the taming of the West and what would become part of Canada and the province of Alberta. But I always loved the mountains and the ocean. So as soon as I got my degree, I moved to British Columbia. I got a forestry degree and I moved there to start my forestry career. And when I was studying to earn my registration as a professional forester and then working as a forester, I continued to learn more and more about the history of Western Canada that I didn't know. And I was expanding my understanding of the past, the stories of this land. And paradoxically, the more I learned, it seemed, the more I was aware of how little I knew. You know, beyond the Western science knowledge that I had of ecology and insects and soils and forest mensuration and policy and law, all the things that my studies and my qualifications gave me, I was poorly informed about how things were in this place for thousands of years before European settlers came. And as I learned more about that, I began to question, like, how much do I really know about my own country, about this place, about Canada? How much didn't I know? And I decided this is an area of professional and personal development that I really needed to improve. What was the real full story of this place? So I enrolled in a course that was offered through the University of Toronto called Indigenous Worldview in Education. And one of my first assignments in that course was to watch a movie. And that movie forever changed my perspective on the arrival of settlers, colonization, and the story that I had been reading about the history of Canada. Now, I want to share the very beginning of that movie with you, like the first quick scene. It's not very long. Rather than me badly tell it, let's watch it together. Here, let's have a look.
What do you call this place?
It's a barbecue area.
Barbecue area? They call this barbecue area. Nice native name. Colourful. I like it.
When the first black settlers arrived in Barbecue area, they found a native population sheltering around primitive open fires, attempting to cook their food with crude implements, and even seeming to take pleasure in burning their meat. I've always been fascinated by white people. The evidence of their culture is all around us. Their art, their industry, their way of life. But what do we think of white people? Excuse me, sir. What do you think about white people?
White people? You've got to be joking.
Well, I don't know. I've never met one.
I love their music. They can't dance, unfortunately, but I love their music.
10 little whitey boys standing in line. One got drunk and then were 9.
They're a developing people. They're starting to take an interest in the world around them. And this is a good sign.
5 years ago, I decided to find out more about these strange and fascinating people. So I came here, to this white ghetto, and I lived for 6 months with a typical white family in this typical white house.
Okay. Obviously, it's a parody. It's flipping the big stereotype of the arrival of whites to a land only occupied by non-whites, and perspective on that without having an understanding of very much at all about the culture. And it, you know, the Minister of White Affairs we still have that now with Indigenous communities in colonial states. Now, this is Australia, but it's one of the Commonwealth, just like Canada. And when I watched that, I thought about even the beginning, about Canada, about the name. What do you call this place? Canada, barbecue area. Nice native name. Colorful. I like it. Barbecue area. Well, between 1534 and between 1534 and 1542, an explorer, Jacques Cartier, made 3 voyages across the Atlantic from France, claiming this land for King Francis I of France. Cartier heard 2 captured guides speaking the Iroquois language, using the word Kanata, which means village. By the 1550s, the name Canada began appearing on maps. It's sure not lost on me that the parody is almost reality. Through this series, I'm going to continue to explore the true history of Canada, that part of the story that I didn't know very well, if at all. I'm going to reflect with you on a number of things that I have learned and where we need to go, I think, in order to reconcile relationships in Canada and to move forward, be prosperous together. It's going to be a long journey. Tragically Hip, a Canadian band, my favorite band of all time. One of my favorite songs of theirs is Looking for a Place to Happen. And the song, one of the lyrics in there Goes like this. Jacques Cartier, right this way. No, you're not the first to show. We've all been here since God who knows. We're going to dig in a little bit deeper on that and the arrival of colonial folks to the shores of Turtle Island and talk about what really happened and keep this conversation of reconciling Canada going forward. Please join me. Put your comments down below. Join me live. It's no longer time to sit back and admire the problem. It's time for action. Let's reconcile Canada.